Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Elena Hutchison, Executive Vice President, Strategy and Product Marketing at Medallia. The topic of today's episode is SC Impact on Marketing. This is a podcast about a pre-sales leader turned head of product marketing. Elena has an incredible journey up from becoming a solutions consultant to running the global solutions consulting and analyst team to also becoming an SVP and now the EVP of strategy and product marketing. So she has grown up in this profession and has such a wonderful perspective on how SCs make a broader impact on the entire organization. And so we're going to talk about SC's role in analyst relations. We're going to talk about SC's role in product marketing. We're going to really dive into some of the details there. I think this is going to be an episode that might surprise you. And it's a really fascinating episode. And no matter what stage of your pre-sales journey you're on, you can definitely learn something from today. Enjoy.
Vivint offers a way for companies to deliver an incredible buyer experience, with pre-sales leading the charge. With Vivint, companies can meet the demanding needs of the sales-proof buyer by aligning sales with product, providing repeatable workflows, delivering on-demand product expertise, and winning more deals with transparency and trust. For more information, visit vivint.com.
Elena, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you today?
I am good. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. You know, we've been talking on LinkedIn for probably multiple months about bringing you on the podcast. So I'm glad it's finally happened. And I just want to congratulate you on your 10-year anniversary and last year, your promotion to EVP of Strategy and Product Marketing.
Thank you. It is very cool to be doing this podcast kind of right on the anniversary of 10 years at Medallia. I'm coming up on that in September. And Medallia is the company that turned me into a pre-sales person or a solution consultant, as we call it. Very cool to kind of look back at the career path that brought me here and then all the places I've been able to go with it here at Medallia.
That's probably a great transition of your pre-sales career journey. Why don't you tell us what got you to where you are today?
So I was a market researcher by training. I was a political pollster at one time in my life, which has all kinds of crazy stories that go along with it. But just before I came to Medallia, I was in what we now would call customer success at a competitor. So I was there for about 5 years doing professional services, and I kind of got a reputation as like a fixer, right? So anytime something went off the rails, right, somebody else's account got mad because we were having quality issues or whatever, I'd get the call that was like, Elena, can you come in and make this customer happy again, lean in, figure out what they want, re-implement stuff so that they'll be happy. And I was pretty decent at that. And I was using a lot of like my market research skills to consult and just make customers happy. What I found was happening though, is like, I could never get rid of them after that. And so I ended up with like a giant portfolio of happy customers who I was kind of selling to. I didn't consider myself a salesperson at all. I was definitely like a professional services person, but I was burnt out, to be honest. So 5 years of like, a fair amount of waking up in the morning and something might be broken. And I was going to spend my day apologizing for stuff that wasn't really my fault. And so I had given my notice. I was leaving. I was actually going to go in-house and just run a customer experience program at, what would be a Medallia customer. And I'd given my notice to my past company. And then I got this call from a recruiter at Medallia. And the pitch was this. There's a job you've never heard of called sales engineering. They were calling it sales engineering back then. And what you'll do is you'll take all the stuff that all the subject matter expertise you have in market research and customer experience. You're not going to build stuff. You're just going to tell people how they should build it. And you're going to bring it to life for them. And you're going to demo it. And you're going to help them set up their program for success. But then you're going to hand it to professional services. And so if anything ever breaks, they would be dealing with that. And your job is just to kind of set the vision and set it up for success. And I was like, man. And by the way, it pays like probably double what you're making in professional services. And so the thing I had to get my head around was like, I don't know if I'm a seller. Sales had all these connotations, like I was wrong about a lot of things, baseball games, restaurants, like relationship building. Right? I had this very Glengarry, Glen Ross kind of like conception of what sales was back then, which was not right, as we all know. But I took the leap. I was like, if I fail miserably at this selling thing, I guess I can always go get another market research job. And so I said, sure, I'll be a sales engineer. So I joined Medallia right about our Series B, one of the very first sales engineers. And my boss at the time had set us up in this very genius way. He hired 6 sales engineers. 2 of us were like me, industry experts from the space, subject matter experts. 2 were professional sales engineers, folks who had sold tech other places, knew how to demo, scope, whatever. And 2 Medallia professional services folks, really knew this technology inside and out. And the six of us were like three legs of a stool. And we built from like those original six people to eventually I was running the pre-sales team here. We call it solutions consulting, and it was up to like 150 people. So that model of kind of subject matter expertise plus this technology expertise plus really knowing how to demo and sell, we built something really very cool based on that. And it, made me into a sales engineer.
That's such a great story. And I appreciate that background. And I love that your team was subject matter experts, professional sales engineers, and people who knew the product. That's a great combination. It's funny because I also started my career in professional services, so I can hear a lot of the things that you went through, right? When I found out about this job, I was like, wow, why wasn't I not doing this previously? One of the things that I know that you're really passionate about, and I want to kind of continue to dig in on this, is bringing in unconventional talent and talent from different places. Can you talk about your experience with that?
If you've been in the space for any amount of time, you are an unconventional talent, right? Pre-sales hasn't existed long enough that a lot of people have built their careers in it. And so when I was building this team back, about a decade ago, we couldn't just go find a pre-sales person. We had to build pre-sales people. And so for us, just like my boss had, you would find someone who had one of those skills and build the other two skills. And so we got really good at looking for talent in unconventional places. You have to get really smart about, okay, what does it take to be a really great SC for us? But I think this applies in a lot of places. We were looking for people who are just naturally curious, right? They're lifetime learners. They tend to read documentation for fun. Maybe they join all the Slack channels that are like kind of technically detailed because they just like knowing stuff, and they tend to gravitate toward technical knowledge. They tend to nerd out about business models, right? They like to understand how businesses make money, and they kind of think it's fun to understand how, a business would become more efficient. And they tend to be natural storytellers. And actually, you can find people who have that skill set in teachers, in trainers. In our business, we found a lot of market researchers who had that skill set, like myself. And those folks, they were analytical, they could talk, they could present, and they were kind of atrophying, analyzing data places, and we could turn them into sellers. All we had to do was teach them, not to click all over the screen and drag their mouse everywhere, right? And you can train that. We had no choice but to do that. And now, I think it's so cool what PreSales Collective and the Academy are doing, because it's like you're doing that much earlier than we were able to. You're able to catch people as they come out of college or as they're transitioning careers and find people and turn them onto this like really incredible career path that is lucrative, gives you a lot of flexibility. We did that a long time ago. And it's very cool because once you have this skill set, it actually translates into all kinds of other things, I think.
I worked in operations, in athletic operations, in hospitality operations, and I went to a hospitality tech company, Revenate, that was actually doing hotel surveys. And I used to work for Hyatt, so I used to be a Medallia user. And so when I went to Revenate, I was a subject matter expert because I knew how the product worked. I was a Medallia user. I knew what the life was like as a hospitality professional, and it allowed my tech career to expedite and move really fast. And I think, as you talked about PreSales Academy, shout out to the Academy team because they're doing a wonderful job of being able to standardize and find folks who want to make that career shift and that career pivot, and helping them bridge that gap, because not every company or organization, like you mentioned, has the infrastructure to take non-traditional talent and set them up for success. And I think from my purview, that's been the biggest thing is companies want to hire a lot of these folks, but if they don't have the infrastructure or the onboarding or the setup to make these people successful, it ends up being a bit of a risk. And so I love that you guys did that at Medallia, because I think it's super important to the growth of the profession.
You hit on something there that I just want to call out. Still to this day, I will get a lot of calls from like new SCs asking, how do I be successful? Like, what is the thing you look for? And tapping into what your source of credibility is so important. And so when you started at Revenate, your source of credibility was, I did this at Hyatt, right? I've been in your shoes. And sometimes hiring someone who's a subject matter expert, like that is an incredible source of credibility to be like, I've been you. And now I want to tell you how your life can be better. And so the best SCs sort of are really intentional about thinking about where their credibility comes from. But it can come from a lot of knowledge. It can come from deep knowledge of technology. It can come from having been there. And everybody's credibility is going to come from somewhere different. So everybody's going to have their own style and how they tap into that. But if you as a new SC who's transitioning from somewhere can find that place and center yourself in every meeting and like, here's why I deserve to be here because I'm credible for this reason. So much power comes from that.
That's a mic drop right there. We could just stop the podcast because that is so well said on that for sure. I want to talk a bit about your move to product marketing. Can you talk about your role in product marketing and how PreSales has prepared you to be successful in this role?
Like I said, I've been here 10 years. About 5 years in, I was having my daughter. I was pregnant and I was like, I got to get off the road. I can't be traveling like this. It wasn't a global pandemic at the moment, taking us all off the road. So I actually ended up doing analyst relations before I switched into product marketing, which is sort of a weird path. We were about to go into a Forrester wave and was the first one we had done in 5 years or so. We were looking around the business saying like, who can do this thing? Medallia is going to have to go into a Forrester wave. For folks who are listening who, I'm sure everybody's familiar with Forrester waves, Gartner MQs. We see them, kind of how we go to market, how our customers look at them. What you may not realize is going through a Forrester wave or a Gartner Magic Quadrant looks exactly like a sales cycle. Like every bit of it is, there's a big RFP. Before that big RFP, there is an opportunity to influence the criteria where you can lean in with the analyst. Even before that, you can brief the analyst and kind of say, hey, it's really important that you ask this question and this other question, or you won't really get a good market. It's exactly what we do in a sales cycle where we're influencing what the buyer asks for and what questions they should be making sure they dig into. Medallia, right at the moment where I was like, I got to stop traveling so much, had a need for someone who could explain the product in depth to this analyst community. I raised my hand and said, I'll take that on. So that's how I ended up in product marketing, kind of like through analyst relations. But I think there's this incredible hack where more companies should be using SCs in the analyst relations space because we just have exactly the right skill set to influence an analyst credibly because we know the product detail.
For those that are listening that actually don't know enough about analyst relations, can you maybe talk a little bit about who they are and what value they are to an organization or to a sales cycle?
I mean, again, this is Forrester, Gartner. If you haven't heard of those, you're lucky, and you're probably maybe you're selling something that's not technology, or maybe that you're in like a really early stage company where the market is still forming, and their analyst relations would be influencing Forrester or Gartner to like start to cover a space. That's also something that analyst relations does. But the 10,000-pound gorillas of analyst relations are Forrester waves, Gartner Magic Quadrants. IDC does some stuff too, but they're big evaluations where a credible third party like Forrester or Gartner basically does a big kind of pseudo RFP of the space, looks at all the vendors in it and crowns a winner. They would not call it a winner. There's a quadrant, and the quadrant kind of ranks you on both, typically like for both Forrester and Gartner, the height of the bubbles in that graphic are about your current product. And then the left to right is about your strategy for that product. But essentially the way the market reads them is the further up and to the right you are, the better your product is, and the more likely you are to win cycles. So what I saw in my career, and what you guys probably see too, is customers will use them to shortlist vendors. Like they'll take the list of leaders from a Forrester wave or a Gartner MQ and say, we're just going to send our RFP to these four. And then later in a deal cycle, like buyers really turn to them to say, oh, like you scored really well in these areas and poorly in these other areas. Or they'll give them to procurement and say, we can only go with this vendor because they scored top in the stuff that we need. And so they become, because they're a third party and they're neutral, they become really, really important sales collateral. And so Medallia had done really, really well in a 2011 Forrester wave before I had joined. That was a really important part of our Series B funding and a really important part of kind of the early product market fit. And now they were about to do another one. And so it became this very high stakes moment. Like we got to maintain this leader position. How do we do it? Because if you fall, suddenly you're not getting invited to the same RFPs. You don't have that same third party validation. And then later, Gartner did the same thing. They were slowly ramping up their coverage. We spent a lot of time helping Gartner understand who are the players in the market, who's doing well, who isn't, what's the differentiation you need to understand and ask about. And it's years of building that sales cycle so that they know what to ask.
I appreciate that breakdown because it's very thorough. Again, you brought up the third party. When you're going through a technology evaluation, there are so many options out there. So leaning on the Forresters and the Gartners to help just shortlist makes a lot of sense. And, it does put a lot of stress on the companies that are competing for that top right quadrant. You said the biggest hack was putting SCs in the AR team. So can you talk about what the discussion was about getting the SCs involved in analyst relationships and then really the impact that it had or the immediate impact that it had?
It's all about being in the details, right? Like, let me just take you through kind of a typical analyst discussion, right? What analysts are trying to do is yes, they do the waves and the magic quadrants, and that's a big thing, a big one moment thing. But in general, analyst's job is to take calls from your buyers and explain to them what they should buy and what questions they should ask. And so analysts want to have the latest and greatest information, and they want to have the latest and greatest differentiation at their fingertips. And they want to be really educated about what is truly different between vendor A and vendor B. Typically, analyst relations sits in like a product marketing function or a marketing function or sometimes even a PR function. Those functions often are not in the details enough to explain to an analyst in a way that the analyst can explain to a buyer what they need to ask. So they get talking points instead of getting what they would get from an SC. Well, in the sales cycles I'm in, the questions I hear that really are differentiated or the things I hear from the people who just bought from us are X and Y and Z. And I think those are the things that you should be asking because, yesterday I was in a meeting with a buyer and they asked a question about X that I think was really interesting, or they told me that they saw our competitor demo Y. You can also ask the analyst questions about those things too. You can say, hey, is our competitor telling you the same thing they're telling our buyers? And is that true? And bring that data back into the sales organization. It's interesting. And I go to analyst relations conferences and stuff. And the biggest challenge analyst relations people have is they know that impacting sales and influencing sales and trying to help salespeople use their stuff is the holy grail. They can't figure out how to do it. But it's because they don't speak sales in this way, right? And so if you speak sales and you're close to buyers and you understand that language, you're more valuable to the analyst. And the analyst, say, is more valuable to you.
What were some of the conversations that you were having internally that was like, well, maybe the PR team or the marketing team doesn't have the details. The SCs do. How should we make sure we're building the demos or showcasing the product in a way that really highlights what we're doing and allows us to stand out?
I mean, even back then, we were little. We were small back then.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe you guys have experienced this in moments where you're going after a really big prospect, or you've got a really big demo coming up, and you can actually get a room full of architects, and you're not using the out of the box demo. You're using a really forward leaning, killer, awesome demo. And so we could pull together those kinds of resources. Who are our best architects? Who are our best sales engineers? Let's push this product to the outer bounds of what it can do to really show off. And that's just the kind of thing that, it was really fun to be in a room, just architects at our disposal, to be able to build really cool stuff. Two, the stuff we built became demo proof of concepts that we used in sales cycles and then became hardened to productize. It wasn't anything that we couldn't do, but it was stuff that it was a little bespoke. It required some custom integrations and that kind of stuff, right? And then we hardened it. It became product. So it was my first taste of, hey, we can actually build stuff through analyst relations in this process, because this is the sales cycle. There's no revenue associated, but in some ways, all the revenue is associated, right? And that's kind of how we looked at it.
Reflecting back on my experience, I actually remember when we put one of our early SCs that was fairly technical on the Forrester Wave project as well. And we, like you just said, pushed the boundaries of the product and actually realized the product could do a lot more than we realized it could and would. And I think it allowed us to change some of our use cases as well. And we never really built a team around it per se at Showpad, but we had one individual who was pretty much responsible for that from the SE side. And we took a lot of the things that we did in the Wave project and brought them into our product. And I think that's where the innovation happens.
If your PR person is in charge of answering these questions, what they will do is go to product. I mean, we've all answered RFPs. The question is kind of does your product do this? And the SE answer is yes, because it's an RFP, and you'll figure out the details of how it does that. Can it do it? Hypothetically, yes. With the right integrations and the right, it can. Product's going to say no, right? And they don't understand, that what we're trying to get to is a yes in this particular question. And so, but the nuance of we're trying to get to a yes. Could it do it? Yeah. I figured out a way that it could hypothetically do that. We weren't lying. We weren't doing stuff that wasn't real, but just that thinking of I'm trying to get to a yes. I'm trying to answer that this is possible. And it is. I'm trying to find ways that things are possible. That's the SC mindset, right? It's I'm finding my way to a solution. And it's so beautifully set for this analyst relations task.
How long did you run that team at Medallia?
I still run it. I have never gotten away from analyst relations. I keep adding on other things, but I've been running it since 2016 because all the cool stuff we build starts there. In a lot of ways, it gives us a forcing function to build really cool stuff that shows off. And so I sit on our executive team. I run product marketing. I run all of our institute and kind of thought leadership, customer advocacy, community stuff. I run demo engineering and innovation, and those two things sit together and build all of our demo instances, from the very cool forward-leaning stuff to the very simplest kind of out-of-the-box starter things. And Analyst Relations fits right into that portfolio as well.
I want your job. You got a great job.
It's really fun, but it's the kind of job that only an SC can do, right? I mean, a lot of what I spend my time doing, product marketing is a big part of it, and that's done right. You asked this question before. Analyst Relations kind of led me into product marketing. Again, the way we think about it is product marketing is just sales engineering kind of in a one-to-many way if you're doing it right. And you see the industry moving in this direction. You're seeing product marketing move toward, can we put a demo on our website? How can we engage people with the product before they're engaged with a sales team, right? And who are the right people to take that problem on? It's SEs, right? I mean, we know how to build something compelling. And for me, it's also great because, again, I'm the mother of a small child, right? I have a 5-year-old now. And so I didn't want to be on the road all the time in the way that a sales role would require, but running product marketing and those types of roles, I get to do the SC things more in a one-to-many, enabling our sales team to do it kind of way. But the skill set, take the details, take the product knowledge, apply it so that people understand what our tools can do, totally still applies. And the product marketing team we've built is sales credible, right? So when they show up with messaging, it's not 10,000 foot vague, could describe our competitor or not kind of messaging. It's real and tied to what the product can do. It's a different frame that an SC would put on it. And then in my role in the executive team, I get the opportunity to do a lot of work with our acquisitions. How do we think about if we're going to buy something? And Medallia has added a number of things to our product portfolio over the last several years. How do we think about how are we going to sell this thing? Who's the buyer for this thing? What's it going to integrate with in our portfolio? And how are we going to take it to market? And again, pre-sales, right? I mean, I'm thinking about what are the right integrations. So I don't own our product strategy, right? We have an amazing head of product. We have an amazing head of marketing. My job is to help them think about what are our buyers going to react to? Because I kind of speak for them. So it's really, really fun. And I have an incredible team. They run their stuff. I kind of nudge them in the right direction. But I have a lot of SCs who've grown into other roles, running other types of things here.
I think we also joke that the title of today's podcast should be SCs Run the World. But I mean, I think it's true.
Here. I mean, I've seen SCs go be sales directors. We've seen them in product. We've got SCs who are running major professional services functions here. The sky's the limit. If you can take technology, tell stories about it, nerd out over it, apply it to business problems, what can't you do?
So well said. I want to dig in on this one-to-many aspect of product marketing. So this concept of product-led growth and getting access to the product and demo on the website. Do you have dedicated SCs on the product marketing team?
We don't, but they all report up to me. So those are two different functions which are within my team. But the way we're structured, it's kind of like a matrix. For example, I've got a product marketer who runs our contact center suite. And then I've got a demo engineer who runs our contact center suite. And those two are talking all the time. And they are sitting on the product team that runs our contact center suite. And so those two people are represented in every product-oriented conversation we're having about what that suite should be doing, how it should be talking. So they sit at the center of decision-making. And then they are the one-to-many and the one-to-one arm of kind of bringing it to life for everybody. So the demo engineering lead, make sure that the whole SC core can demo it, has the scripts, has everything that can POC it, has everything they need to bring it to life for any one sales cycle. And the product marketer, make sure that, the website, the all of that kind of the webinars, all of that stuff brings it to life for the customer base.
Do you think this is the organization of the future? Should pre-sales folks run product marketing and own a lot of the aspects that you currently own today?
It's an interesting question. And what I can say is it works. Wherever people come from, product marketers have to be in the details. And analyst relations people, to be effective, have to be in the details. I couldn't believe more strongly that if you don't understand fundamentally what differentiates your product and why someone buys it or doesn't and where it fits in the market, you can't do your job well. And so wherever you come from that gives you that skill set, You have to do that to be an effective product marketer or analyst relations person, in my opinion. And so, maybe there are some analyst relations things where that's not true, like if it's not technology oriented that way. So where you get that skill set, I guess I wouldn't necessarily comment on. There are other ways you can get it other than being a sales engineer. And certainly if the only function is, hey, I just need a demo for the website, you could borrow an SC for that one function and do it. But I think the structured way of thinking, like what is the demo that's going to be simple and bring this to life and educate in the way that I need, SC is pretty good at it.
I agree. And this is, one of my favorite things about being co-founder of PreSales Collective. I get to talk to all kinds of companies who are doing some very innovative things. Some of the thesis that I've come up with recently is that you should either have a sales engineer in product marketing when you're going to put a demo on the website, or you need to have a demo engineering team that sits between both, the solutions consulting and the product marketing team that builds those. Because some of the feedback that I've heard so far is that, marketing's building our demo for the website and they don't know what they're doing.
Can't do that. That won't work.
It's happening all over the place, right? Which is why a lot of what we're trying to do is define what best in class looks like, because this profession has continued to grow and grow without, maybe it feels overused, but like the strategic seat at the executive table, right? It's just been lacking. And so we're trying to be a voice that says, hey, buying is changing, sales is changing. This role is the unlocked potential that you haven't been utilizing. So let us try to tell you how it can make a bigger impact on your business, on your customers, and on the team and growth of your organization.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, look, a simple thing that I did when I first took on this product marketing team, I trained them all, certified them all to deliver the roadmap. But then for me was get them into meetings, right? Because nobody wants entourages coming to their sales meetings, but I need marketers to be able to watch sales meetings and hear the questions that were being asked. And I needed them to be able to credibly deliver something to the meeting. And the obvious easy thing was, we needed people who could do the roadmap. Like it's an easy certifiable thing. It's like one slide. It kind of comes, there's like 3 minutes at the end of the meeting where you do that, maybe one. So you got to be able to flex, but you can certify them to be able to do that. And then that got them 55 minutes of observing a meeting. And suddenly we're getting people access to observing how we demo. What are the slides? How are we presenting them? There's technology that does this too. Like if you're using Gong or you're using like other, there are things that allow you to see that. But I think there's no substitute for feeling what it is to be accountable for delivering content in a meeting. Because if you haven't felt that, then it's easy to deliver content that you would never actually deliver yourself in a meeting. I have felt content delivered to me as a seller. I'm like, you wouldn't stand up and give that to a customer. Yeah. So whatever the role structure is, like for me, that's the bar is like, would you present that to a client and would you feel good about it? Yeah. I want to build a product marketing team that and I have, I feel strongly that our product marketing team meets this bar 1000%. They're proud of the content and it's rooted in what the product does well. You have to build that or else it's 10,000 feet and kind of big.
Elena, so well said. And I have so many questions that I want to continue to ask and thoughts that I have for PreSales Collective content coming out of this podcast. But we do have to wrap with an advice question. And there are so many questions I could ask you to provide advice on. But what advice do you have for pre-sales leaders, solutions consulting leaders that don't necessarily have a role in analyst relations or don't necessarily have a big enough role with the marketing and product marketing team, but know that they need that to continue to drive value for their team and their organization within their business?
Good question. I mean, reach out, right? One of the best things that you can do, I think this is just a great SC tip. Whenever someone new comes into the organization, like especially senior people, try to get yourself in the position to give them their first demo. If you're a good SC, you can set the tone for how you enable. It's like we just had a new executive join the company, and the SCs who train that person are the ones who set the tone for their understanding of the entire product suite, how it comes together. It's a great networking opportunity for the SCs who take advantage of that because like suddenly they're in front of an executive and they become the go-to subject matter experts internally. So I guess my advice generally would be, that feels like extra volunteer work. Like, hey, can you come do a demo to this new person? But particularly for product marketing, for analyst relations, for any of these roles where this person is going to be responsible for talking about you publicly in a way that might lead to a Forrester Wave outcome, a Gartner MQ, like some really high value thing, a demo on the website, right? Any of that. build those relationships. And like, something really valuable, which is how we go to market, how we tell our story, influence that from the ground up. There is no better way than saying, hey, welcome. Can I just take an hour and show you how we go to market? SCs are great at that. And it's such a good relationship building thing. So I love when my team takes the time to do that. I always did that too. I think it's a great networking hack and you know it, so it doesn't take you long to prep for it. I would do that.
I think it's great feedback. And, just comment on the volunteer aspect. I mean, if we want this profession to continue to get a bigger slice of the pie and continue to derive value from an organization, you're going to need to volunteer and take on those responsibilities to continue to get the respect and the seat at the table within organizations. And that's why we continue to talk about, pre-sales as a co-pilot in sales and really a driver of customer experience. So I really appreciate your advice. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. And thank you so much for all your support of the PreSales Collective.
Thank you so much for having me, for everything you guys are doing. This is awesome.
Congrats on the 10 years and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, PreSales Collective. I'm not even sure where to start. What a fun episode. Elena brought the energy and the perspective today. I told you in the intro this was going to be a lot of fun, and we absolutely delivered today. I love that Elena's journey starts as a subject matter expert before she went to Medallia and talked about the makeup of her team, being a subject matter expert, a product expert, and professional sales engineers as the first 6 hires at Medallia. And that organization has grown so much over the past 10 years. And it's amazing to see the emphasis on bringing in non-traditional or unconventional talent, as they called it. If you hear Elena's perspective, she really believes that SCs have such transferable skills that they can make an impact on a number of functions within the organization. And she highlights that by saying that Medallia has really leaned into that and leaned into this role's impact on an organization. And as we talk about the role of the SC, I love that she talked about analyst relations. This is not something that we've really talked about with PreSales Collective, and understanding the value of this role on analyst relations, on Forrester, on Gartner. And if you reflect back to your experience, whether as a company preparing for one of those reports or a company in a sales cycle, and your prospect is using Forrester or Gartner to influence the decision, this is really powerful. My favorite part of what Elena talked about was how the analyst relations team pushed the boundaries of the product. We're a center of innovation and really influenced what happened on the product roadmap from there. And as Elena took her experience of analyst relations into product marketing, she talked about how the SC team plays a role and influences the demo engineering team and the one-to-many functions and the demo on the website. And these are concepts that we want to continue to put out to the ecosystem because the best companies know how to tap into the solutions consultants. They understand the impact they make on an organization and where you can use them to be a multiplier effect on customer, on prospects, on your internal team and external team. This is why we talk about pre-sales at the center of influence. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and find value in the structure and the approach to utilizing SCs in marketing. And you're going to hear more about this topic, maybe at one of our upcoming events, because this is something that we want to continue to stress on. All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like and share our podcast. It really goes a long way in making an impact and getting our profession out there. As always, I will see you next week.